This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
The views expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of WPSL. However, you are encouraged to like and share them on Facebook and YouTube and all of your friends, because it's time now for Howard Insurance of Port St. Lucie to present the African American scene. And your host, as always, the one and only Rudy Howard.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. Always glad to be with you here on a Wednesday night. I'll tell you, it's like we can't seem to get a break from this COVID thing. And you know, have a relative that I've been speaking to almost nonstop for 4 days about getting the shot because he doesn't want to get it. He is convinced that you can take herbs and vitamins and that will immunize you from the COVID virus.
Not necessarily. If you've got a great immune system going, it could be helpful in prevention. However, well, if he's not getting his vaccination, this pandemic is kind of amongst the unvaccinated.
I agree. Listen. What I was trying to tell him is that I take vitamins, I take minerals and supplements because I recognize those things can help to strengthen your immune system. But there's nothing that I'm doing or that I am aware of that could defeat COVID. Just nothing that I know of could defeat COVID. Now, I saw a thing with Asa Hutchinson, who's the governor of Arkansas, trying to tell his constituents, and you know he's a very, very conservative guy, that they need to get the vaccine, and people were yelling at him. And one guy said, "Tell me what's in it. I'll get it when you get it," or he said, "I'll get it when you tell me what's in it," or and then one lady she was about 20 years old. "When are you going to start telling the truth and tell people how they can really defeat COVID without getting this stuff shot in their bodies?" And I'm like, so I think to myself, are these people living on Mars? Do they not remember that we got rid of polio? Pretty much got rid of polio from getting a vaccination. You're not allowed to go to school unless you have your proper vaccinations to enter school. So what is the deal here with this? And here's the really important part. Our government has bent over backwards. You don't even have to pay for it. You don't even have to pay for it to get it to be safe. And here's the thing that I was trying to convey to my nephews. What's the downside of getting it? What are you going to lose by getting the shot? Some people die from it. Well, maybe. I can't say that hasn't happened. Maybe it has. But if something has a 90% efficacy rate, that does mean that 10% of the time it's not going to work the way it's intended to work.
And folks who've had their shots, who've tested positive for COVID, are not suffering severe symptoms. They're mild symptoms.
Exactly.
Because they've already got the antibodies in their body to fight it off.
Exactly. Just like what Lindsey Graham said the other day. Lindsey Graham had his shots, and so when he got the COVID, he didn't have it bad at all. So I don't know, but if you got an opinion, I'm just so like exasperated with folks and not feeling like they should get the vaccine. If you have an opinion, please feel free to call up. It's 340-1590. That's 340-1590. I'd like to know why you feel that it is not right for you to get the vaccine. Some people feel it's like they don't want the government telling them what to do, but I think that's a bogus excuse. They tell us how fast we can drive. They tell us we have to wear a seatbelt, and I can remember where people were really irritated about having to wear a seatbelt. You remember that, Cliff?
Oh, yeah.
People didn't want to put that seatbelt on.
I didn't want to put it on.
Yeah, now.
I thought I had a little sign in my car that says if I burn up in this car and the seatbelt's on, call my lawyer.
Right. But hey, everybody puts it on now. You don't even think about it anymore. You put your seatbelt on because it's become a matter of course.
Saves ticket money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So,
and I can understand that. The tickets will fund something to probably public awareness of safety belts. You know, they use that money for positive things.
yeah, well, they even, some people think that the shot is an injection of something that they're going to use to track you or something, some bizarre.
You know, that came from a conspiracy theory. There was a conspiracy theory. It wasn't. We never heard it on this station. In fact, I was on another station at the time when I heard a doctor talking about autism in children being caused by vaccinations.
Yes.
And that's been debunked. That's been long debunked now. But at the time, everybody was talking about it. You got to watch these conspiracy theories.
Well, and there's a doctor, one of the doctors that's advocating these minerals and herbs to defeat COVID is Dr. Wallach. And Dr. Wallach is the one who said that the vaccines could give your kid autism. So I don't know. But in any event, we got Jay on line one. Hey, Jay, how you doing?
Okay, how you doing? I'm doing pretty good, Rudy. I was just listening to you talk about, and there's a lot of people here in Florida, and it's all over the media, you know, in the national media, just bashing Florida and our leadership here, so-called leader, for what he's doing and how he's telling teachers that, well, the kids don't want to have no, wear face masks, come back to school. They don't have to, you know. I remember going to school. I couldn't go to school unless I got the shots that were recommended to get into public school.
Yeah.
They wouldn't. They told my mother that you have to take the shots. If he doesn't take the required shots, he cannot be admitted in any public school in the New York system. That's what they told my mother.
Yeah.
I remember that. Huh?
Same thing in Philadelphia.
Yeah. And that's what, and it happened the same thing when I was in the military. I understand now. I think they said 20 or 30% of people in the military are not. They didn't take the vaccine because they choose not to. When I was in there, you had to take every shot that was available, and whatever they wanted. You know, wherever you were going in the world, you took many more because you'd be going into foreign countries, and they had different things that they didn't want. They didn't want you to catch, so you had to take shots before you left the United States. That was mandatory. You didn't even have anything to say about it or to argue about. They just said that's what you're going to do, and that's what you're going to take. Get your behind out of here and go back to your regiment.
Hey, look, Jay, I remember that. In fact, I remember they did it with the shotgun. I guess they've done away with those now. You remember that?
Yeah, I remember all that stuff.
Yeah, so you would stand up there and they come up with the gun, bing, and next, so yeah.
I just check, man. When I watch, listen to the media and how they try to alibi, especially on certain, conservative networks. They just go off and off about, we got our First Amendment right. Look, when there's a pandemic, and over 600,000 people have passed because of this thing. And you mean to tell me they still heen and haw about that First Amendment, right?
Oh,
I mean, to me, it should be a no-brainer. I don't know what's going on with the leadership. I don't know if the president doesn't have the right to do that. I think he does, to make it mandatory because of public health, and because the governors, in these certain states, they won't do it, like in these southern states, and out in Texas and places like that, Arizona. But it should be at the national level where they say, no, we're not going to tolerate any more deaths in this country because of ignorance.
Well,
that's what it is. It's nothing but ignorance.
Yes, you see.
I think they need to step and take, put the foot down.
Yeah, well, you see, DeSantis is just auditioning for a run for president. Let's face it. I mean, that's what he's doing. He's getting as far to the right as he can get, and it is just it's ridiculous. He's making us look foolish to the rest of the country.
Yeah.
But the conservatives that live here, I'm sure they love him for what he's doing. I think he's a moron, telling kids they can't. He's going to take money away from the school if they try to make kids wear masks. Are you please?
Yeah. Yeah, you say you're going to take money away from the state, the counties, or the or the places, the cities, the counties mainly that that doesn't follow his orders.
Right.
He's going to take money from that's allocated for education away. It doesn't even. It sounds so stupid, and it reminds me of what's going on in some parts of this world, like Hungary with Erdogan and all these dictators, and fascist type folks that think that it's only one way, their way or the highway, and they're going to just make it, they're going to just do what they want to do to the people, and that seems to be the course that these people in the Republican Party they want this country to go. I guess they see the change in the geographic. I see the change in the population is going to be more browner, and and they just don't want that. So they figured if they can just take a hand on it now,
Jay, here's the problem,
and stop you from doing things, stop you from voting and all that.
Here is the problem right now with the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. The evidence is overwhelming. The vast majority of the people do not agree with them. They do not agree with their philosophy of how they want to go about doing things. People just don't agree.
Right.
Most people, even the leaning conservative, are more likely to agree with a Democratic approach than a Republican approach. Now, you got some hardcore that are going to live and die with the conservative approach, but for the vast majority of people, they don't agree. They see that. Mm-hmm. And they know now that to win, they have to jury rig the system.
Yeah.
It's the only way they're going to win.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
And that's what they're doing, and I think that, the Congress, it's the Senate right now, they got to wake up and make sure that every American that's eligible to vote has their right to vote and not be, gerrymandered or told, or intimidated or whatever they're trying to do, what they're doing around the country to change voting laws and all that. They need to get up off that and let everybody vote who's eligible to vote. And if they want more voters, then they have to encourage people to come over to their side and do things that's going to help every American and not just a few.
Yep, I agree. Thanks for calling, Jay.
Okay. Take care, man. Appreciate it.
All right, take care. Steve, how are you, sir?
Good. How are you?
All right.
I'm perplexed as you are about this. The vaccine thing is nothing more than what I call the GOP, the godless, oppressive, paranoid. Just looking for something to start trouble.
Yes.
They don't have anything to help the American people, so they're going to attack anything that does help the American people.
Yep.
You have to remember that the what they call conservatives are the biggest socialists I've ever seen. but they keep maintaining their conservatives. But here's what they're missing. We have 7 million people right now who could be evicted out on the street. Those are mostly women and children. What are you going to do with 7 million people on the street? It's not going to work. So it's time for America to say, you know what? We're Americans first, last, and always. We helped Americans when they were down to bring them up. We need to do that again. And if that means building Section 8 housing like we have out where I live in Torino, get along fine, over on the east side of town or in Tradition, so be it. But we have to take care of the American people, not the American political system.
You're absolutely right. And you know, unfortunately, the GOP makes it like, you know, why you want to help people?
Yeah.
I don't get that.
I don't get it either, because we're all Americans.
Yes.
I hate to tell them that, but like I tell the story, when I went to Italy and the 2 Italian guys from New York were goombahing it all the way, when they got to customs, the customs guy informed them in no nice terms that they were not Italians, they were Americans. Look at your passport. And the guy said, try not to embarrass us while you're here. And these guys just like, whoa. They don't understand. They think that they can go anywhere in the world and they're going to be worshipped. They're crazy.
Yep.
America's reputation is in the gutter now. The Afghan guys that helped us, we've abandoned 3/4 of them. Said, oh, if you can get to Kabul, we'll get you out of there, but there's no way to get to Kabul. So, you know, it's things like that.
Look at what we did to the Kurds.
Oh, yeah. We sold them out entirely.
Yeah.
And they are the ones that saved our bacon in the north.
Yep.
And look what we did to Saddam Hussein, who hated Al-Qaeda and killed them on sight. And now everybody admits that George Bush started that war illegally.
Yes, he did.
There's no reason. And we lost an ally that would have fought Al-Qaeda to the last tooth.
Weapons
But
of
in
mass
this
destruction.
Yeah, I did some research. In 5 to 7 years in the United States, white people will be a minority. People of color will be the majority.
Yes.
So any way you look at it, my own family, like I said, United Nations. We got Yamaguchis. We got Vargases. We got Lopez's. We got Gonzalez's. We got Johnsons. We get Carroll's, D. Jarnett. I mean, when somebody says those immigrants, I have to look around and go, well, that's us.
Yeah.
But we still have to take care of them. And when we got people that are living in 25,000 square foot houses and paying no taxes, but other people with 2 kids and living on SNAP in a tent, that's not right. That's not America.
I agree.
We need to take care of America first, and the way to do that is for our people, you other Americans, to get off your cellulite and go to the phone and call up your representative and your congressman and your city councilman and anybody else you can think of, and read them the riot act.
I'll tell you what. You may not agree with her politics, but Cori Bush is the kind of representative you would hope your representative would be. She stayed out there and slept on the steps of the Capitol.
Yeah, the black lady. Yeah.
Yep. To get them to do something about those people being evicted.
Well, I was starting to. What I wanted to do was start a fund to give the Republican senators testicle transplant, so that they get enough balls to do their job. And I figured if we put it on the internet, we could raise some funds and get this done.
Yeah.
But it's like the vaccinations. You know, some of them wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
But if we don't vaccinate everybody, This is going to go on and on and on and on until it finally takes us down.
I agree.
Because it will take us down, believe me. You guys haven't even seen the worst yet. The worst is when all of a sudden that 30 trillion, the 2 trillion they're going to pass out for infrastructure, and the trillion they're going to pass out for. When that's all added in, we'll be over 200% above our GDP. That's not good. The dollar is sounding up. It's firming up. That's good. But until this country gets back into the swing of things and decides we're going to beat the pandemic so we can open up America fully, look around here. Just in our town, Ruby Tuesday's out of business. Friday's out of business.
Yep.
And on and on. Aldi's announced they're closing in America. CVS, 200 stores. Walgreens, 300 stores. Walmart is closing 300 stores and opening 60 supercenters.
Yeah.
The list goes on and on. The gap. I mean, people, these brick and mortar places are going under because you can't go indoors in the pandemic. Nobody wants to go indoors.
Yeah.
And these holdouts, I think that's the kid that's 6 years old and running through your rose bushes, not to destroy the roses, but to get attention.
Right.
And right now they just said that Queerland, Florida, was their stronghold. So you can expect those nut jobs to keep popping up. But the good news is 98% of the people that are dying are not vaccinated. And those are mostly right-wing nuts. So if we just let them follow their course, we might be able to get rid of them on their own.
I mean, sometimes the gene pool has a way of cleansing itself.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Lord works in mysterious ways.
Yes. Well, thank you, Steve,
But
for
when
calling.
you have 660,000 people dead and you're still denying that it's a killer, that's called terminal stupidity.
Yes, sir.
There's no cure. Thank you, Rudy.
Thank
Have
you,
a nice
sir.
day.
Okay. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, he's so right. It's like I don't know how people are still telling themselves they don't want to get a vaccine. I don't know. But anyway, so in light with this crisis about people being evicted, I thought it might be a good time to revisit homelessness and public housing. I know Roxy talks about homelessness on here. When is it? She comes on Tuesday nights, right?
Yeah, she was on last night.
Yeah, she's a good one because she taught me some things about homelessness. But let's talk a little bit about public housing. Public housing. The first public housing project started in like 1935. Okay, in Atlanta. Now, I will tell you, public housing, when it was first built, it was built predominantly for white folks. It was segregated public housing, like many things back at that time. And they had the Housing Act of 1937, which came after the 1935 construction of the Techwood project in Atlanta. And it allowed for the additional construction of public housing. Then in 1949, the Housing Act expanded the construction of public housing even further. Now, so you had, it started in 1935. 1937, the act was in, and it got reauthorized in 1949. So we started having public housing around 1935. In 1974, Richard Nixon put a moratorium on all public housing. No more public housing in 1974. Then in 1992, the Hope 6 program was created. Now, the theory behind the Hope 6 program was that it was going to come in and move people out of the dilapidated tenements that they were in, repair them, fix them up, and allow people to move back in. Well, what happened was, with this program, they moved people out and they fixed them up, but after they were all fixed up, half of the people that were moved out could not afford to come back in. So now let me tell you another very important issue about this tearing down of the public housing projects, because it's kind of important for you to understand. In the cities, in the big cities, the cities run by territories. So the kids from the east side or the west side are from the east side, and the kids from the west side are from the west side. I'm just saying that to make it simple. Actually, if you think about it, there was a show on when we were kids. Some of you will remember the East Side Kids, and it was about these tough Irish kids in New York that had a little gang. That was called the East Side Kids. Look it up on Google. You'll find it, the East Side Kids. Well, so now for Chicago, for example, I happen to know this firsthand. The city of Chicago had its sections, and one of the sections in Chicago was Cabrini Green, which was not far off of downtown, so which is why I know they tore it down. I stayed at the Ambassador Hotel when I was in Chicago, which was maybe about 4 blocks from Cabrini Green, so I knew that sooner or later they were going to get rid of that, and they did. But here's the problem. Cabrini Green was the headquarters for the local gang in that area. So when they tore down Cabrini Green, they dispersed them throughout the city of Chicago, which has caused for tremendous conflict, which is a part of the Chicago thing that none of you knew about till just now. You got it from me. That's part of what has happened in Chicago. The territory, they breached the territory of Cabrini Green, and that gang no longer had its own turf. And so they pushed everybody together. Now, that doesn't excuse what they've done. That is not being apologetic for whatever crimes they've committed. I'm just giving you some background information to let you know about why such things in the cities like that can happen. In 1998, the Faircloth Amendment limits the construction of new public housing. So in 1998, they passed this amendment that limited the construction of new public housing. So what I'm trying to get you to understand is, which is very important, they have eliminated and reduced the amount of public housing dramatically over the years. Places where people went, and now I would tell you, in case you didn't know, there's long waiting lists for people trying to get into public housing because it's affordable. Even though it's not the best place in the environment maybe for your kids, it's affordable and allows people to have a roof over their head and not sleep in the woods in a tent. And if you ever listen to Roxy, and I'm going to recommend you listen to her on a Tuesday night if you have the time, she will educate you about what homelessness is, and it's nothing like what you think. Most of you think people that are homeless are dregs. They just irresponsible people that just did all the wrong things and now want us to feel sorry for them, and that's not the case at all.
It's very interesting what I found out. I had, for a while, I lived over there by the Riverwalk.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a group of homeless men that actually slept under the South Bridge. And I got to know a couple of them, talking to them. And I caught one of them standing at an ATM one day. It was around the first of the month, and his pension check drops into his card. And I said, "You mean you've got money and you choose to be homeless?" And he said, "It's easy. This is Florida." I'll tell you what, I'd prefer to have an apartment or something. But Roxy's show is also, just like the African American scene with Rudy Howard, Roxy's Careology program is archived on YouTube as well.
Yes.
So you can check out both and binge watch both.
Yeah, and listen, she first told me when I had her on the show here a couple years ago now about families living in tents in the woods, and the mother gets up and goes to work every day.
Yeah. And the kids go to school.
Yes, in the tent. Then they come back home and they come to their tent to live. That's where they live at. Cause
the indigenous people of the earth, they lived in teepees and tents.
Yeah.
Things like they got by okay.
And the thing that you have to understand, once you acquaint yourself with the situations, once you're down like that, trying to get back up is really, really tough. Because just think about it for a second. I could move tomorrow and I could get my utilities turned on, and I'm not going to have a deposit because I've had utilities for 20 years. If I was homeless and I finally got a place to stay and I wanted to get utilities, I'm going to have to make a deposit.
Yeah.
Or else they're not going to turn my utilities on. True. Now, and see, that's part of what makes me crazy about our country. I'm broke as hell trying to get a place, and I got to come up with a deposit for utilities when I could barely come up with enough money to get my rent together to find a place to live.
Well, what if you're trying to pay your bills and you say you have to sell your car? And then you're without a car. It's hard to get out of that situation.
It
back
is.
to where you get in behind a wheel again.
Yes, it is.
And all these things could happen to anybody.
It can. It can. One of the things that I know when I had her on a couple years ago, a woman's husband left her and the kids. And, you know, I over the years being in the insurance business, on more than one occasion, I've seen where a guy left and the wife didn't know anything about finances, didn't know anything about bank accounts, nothing. And so there she is now, left to have to deal with all that stuff by herself. And I try my best to tell any of my friends that, you know, you're not doing your wife any favors to not allow her to be able to know what's going on with the bills and the transactions that are taking place in the house. Because if you go out and get hit by a car, you leave her to just scrap for herself. And that's not good. But anyway, so that's the story about where we've been as far as public housing is concerned. And I think we need to get back to that. Now, I will tell you this. I lived in a community in Maryland called Columbia, Maryland. Columbia, Maryland was very unique in that all of the apartment buildings in the city, a percentage of every apartment building had to give a rent to low income. So if it's 20%, then 20%, 20, excuse me, 20% of that building had to be filled by low-income people. So in essence, what you had in Columbia was sometimes you had a long waiting list of people trying to get into the apartment buildings, but if you were a regular payer of rent, you could move right in. Now, it actually worked pretty good, and I'll tell you why. The places never really got dilapidated because you had a mixture of people within the building. So, and believe it or not, if you own a house, if you watch your neighbors go out and they start fixing their yard and they start painting their house, it's like a disease in the neighborhood.
Or when they cut their grass.
Yeah.
The same thing. You ever cut your grass and next thing you know, by God, the neighbor's cutting his grass too. He didn't want you to make him look bad.
That's exactly right. So what happens is, you know, you have in a mixed unit like that, you got people who have a certain sense of pride in how they live. So, you know, that carries over to all the rest of the people that are in the building. Now, we're down to like the last 20 minutes, and the one area on this homeless deal that I need to really talk about, and I talked about it once before, is foster care. Cliff's heard me talk about this before, and some of you have probably heard me talk about this before.
Some of us are very familiar with it, too.
Yeah, and it's a thing I'm very passionate about. If at any given time there are roughly 400,000 youth in the foster care system, okay, nationwide, around 400,000. About 20,000 of them age out every year. So what's an age out? If you agree to take a foster care kid, you get a monthly compensation for having that kid in your home until they reach the age of 18. At 18, the money stops. You, at that point, are no longer obligated to take care of that kid. That kid, you can just wash your hands of that child at 18 years old. And that kid now is on their own.
I don't see how anybody can wash their hands of a kid that they raised, which they volunteered to raise. Don't they get attached? I know they do. I've raised stepchildren. I had no problem with stepchildren. I know a lot of people who've raised foster children and actually adopted children. There's another step you can take beyond that.
Yes, it is.
It's an option.
But, Cliff, unfortunately, there's people that when that money stops, it's when the money stops, you know. The money stops and they go, okay, you got to go. You got to go somewhere else.
It shouldn't just stop. Maybe it should go to the kid until they get it together a little bit. Maybe some college money.
Well, what they can do is, if you qualify, and there is a manner of being qualified as a foster child in Florida, you can go on to college and you can get room, board, and tuition. Yeah. But you have to qualify. But if you don't qualify, you're on your own. And you know, you heard me say this before, and I tell you what, I'm a pretty smart guy, and I'm pretty independent, but boy, I tell you what, at 18, I was not ready to take care of myself.
Me either.
Could you take care of yourself at 18?
When I was 16, my mom started saying this little phrase over and over to us: straighten up and get a job.
Yeah.
And starting that at 16, and then I realized, well, I'm going to someday, and all this someday had to come to a point at some time. But what nobody expected was I would find something that I loved to do, and it's never seemed like work to me.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, Now, here's a Florida statistic, and this is what I tell my pro-life people about all the time. When you tell me you're pro-life, you're not pro-life, you're pro-birth, and I'm going to prove it to you right now. In Florida, in 2008, 1,365 kids aged out, okay, of foster care. That's in 2008. 1,365. 1 in 4 of them will be incarcerated within 2 years.
Whoa. Unfortunate.
Can you imagine that? 1 in 2 of those 1,000.
It sounds so good you say 1 and 2, but that's 50%.
Exactly right.
50%.
Yes.
Doesn't sound so nice and cushy now, does it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, let me stand correction now. It's 1 in 4.
But still, that's 25%.
That's 25%. That's correct. Yeah, that's still. So, are going to be incarcerated within 2 years because you know what? They got no place to go. They may not have a job, and if they're lucky, and a lot of it, I'm telling you, you can't convince me. Some of it is just pure luck. They get with the right person, or they find the right job, and they get somebody that's willing to lift them up. Because what they really need is somebody that's going to help lift them up. So that's the story. But the homeless problem began all the way back in 1607, believe it or not. In 1607 to 1776, the colonists stole land from the Indians in order to make a home for themselves.
That most certainly wasn't nice.
No.
Not neighborly at all.
In 1619, the first slaves came to the United States. And let's see here, in the 1670s, the English colonists and the native people became homeless during King Philip's War in New England, which was the last major effort by the indigenous people to expel the English settlers from the country. And that was in the 1670s. So a lot of English and indigenous people were homeless back then. Then in 1804, the Louisiana Purchase doubles the size and of the country, and it also had an expansion of slavery in the, let's see what it says here. Yes, there was an expansion of slavery back then. So that was as a result of the Louisiana Purchase. So we go on to 1863. Now here's an interesting part. So in 1804 we had the Louisiana Purchase, expanded the United States, expanded slavery with Louisiana. Then in 1863 we had the Emancipation Proclamation by Lincoln, and the slaves were freed. Now, the slaves were homeless. You know? Think about it.
They're free, but they have to get out.
Well, where they gonna go?
Wow, yeah, that's.
They had no
See,
job.
these are things we all never thought about. These things.
I know.
As we hindsight's 20/20 if you're there, but if you're not there, it's hard to find the truth, and we know how the truth can be kind of skittled around and buried here and there.
Well, that's what and a lot of times they don't want you to know those
Yeah.
things, but
Yeah.
just think about that for a second now. Lincoln comes along and says, okay, we're going to free the slaves. So the slaves are now free. The masters got to let you go. So now you're free to go. Where you going to go? What you going to do? What job do you have? What house do you live in? You've been living in slave quarters for the last umpteen years.
Did any of those slave owners? Did any of them offer employment?
What they ended up doing was allowing for sharecropping. And that was basically, they were ripping off the slaves. The slaves, many of the slaves became sharecroppers. So
Sort of like the old factory store.
Yeah, so what they would do is they would harvest the crops, and for harvesting the crops, they would get a piece of money for the part of the work that they did. Now, the other thing that happened was they enacted the black codes back then. So what it boiled down to is if you were found to be loitering, they would jail you and make you part of the forced labor force. So you would be working for a plantation owner via the public jail system. So this homeless thing has gone back a long, long way. So and what they did actually, as they've gotten rid of from the public housing, which we talked about earlier, they went to the Section 8. Now, think about what that was. That was a way to put some money in rich people's pockets. Because if you understand what Section 8 is, you make an application to the government that you're going to rent your property to a low-income person, and you in turn get a subsidy check.
Oh.
Okay, so you get a subsidized check for that.
Okay.
So instead of having public housing, we're now giving money to the person that's able to rent their house to a person that needs subsidy, and they get money from the government for that.
I heard a rumor that there were some condos in Fort Pierce that had Section 8 housing in them.
That's
Yeah.
probably true.
You don't hear about that. It's not a highly advertised thing, is it?
No,
Very interesting, though, because the owners, they're not losing any money.
no, and
They're being
probably
subsidized.
I can think of the place you might even be talking about. They're probably somebody owns 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 of those units. So if they got 8 of those units on subsidized housing, they're making a nice little penny for themselves.
Oh,
And if it's subsidized housing during this time of rent loss, they're still getting the checks from the government, so even though they might be
yeah.
losing rent,
Wow.
they still getting the checks from the government because it's a Section 8 house.
Money on money on money, and in the appearance of poverty.
Always the way. So the rich folks still keep getting paid. So it's the people, but the poor people we have to get back to some public housing for folks, because people have to have a place to stay. And we did under Reagan, I remember like it was yesterday, we got rid of all of the mental institutions. You remember that?
Yeah, where do they all go? Because the only thing we have for folks with severe mental problems is jail.
We had in Long Island, there was a huge facility out there. Huge. It was maybe 20 acres, multiple buildings to take care of the mentally disturbed. They closed that place down.
I remember up in Massachusetts, if you knew the Gardner area, there was an area called East Gardner where there was a very popular mental institution there.
Mm-hmm.
And there was Chattahoochee in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Because we used to hear stories of people being sent to Chattahoochee. But today, we don't have these mental institutions anymore. It's all jail, just jail.
Yeah, and Reagan basically emptied those out. The conservative hero Reagan emptied those facilities out, sent those people, and you would see, when I worked in New York City, you could see some of them in the subway, walking around, and you could see obviously they got problems. But there's no place for them to go. They did the same thing in Philadelphia. There was a big place in Philadelphia, and then there was one in Raleigh. Dorothea Dix, my wife talked about all the time. Dorothea Dix was a place in Raleigh where the mentally challenged people could go, and all those places are gone. So I think there was an attempt that conservatives were trying to say, I think everybody needs to stand up and take care of themselves. I get it. I understand that. And I don't think that anybody should be leaning on the government if they're capable of taking care of themselves. But if they can't, then that's why our government is there. The government is there to help you, to assist you, and to help you get up on your feet. There's more than one person that has been able to be successful in life who got a helping hand from the government, that's for sure. So I don't know why all of a sudden we feel, the conservatives feel so offended by having to give someone a helping hand. I think if all the things that Biden wants to do goes through, we are going to see a dynamic change in our society like we haven't seen in a long, long time. Because we need to get these roads and bridges built. We needed to do it under Obama. But now we're going to get these roads and bridges built and then hopefully improve our mass transit system. So that'll be really, really, really great. So I hope I gave you some thoughts to think about regarding the housing and the homeless. And in fact, I'm going to try to get placed on the housing committee for the county so I can participate in some of the decisions with respect to housing for St. Lucie County. It's my desire to do so. So we'll see. But any event, please go get your vaccine. Please get your COVID vaccine.
Don't let any conspiracy theory scare you from getting your vaccine.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't do it. Because it's at the end of the day, all of us will benefit from you getting it because the hospitals won't be overcrowded. And if there's something wrong, you'll be able to go to the hospital and get it taken care of. So, but I'd like to thank you so much for listening to the African American Scene. God bless and be safe, and I will see you next Wednesday right here for the African American Scene.
The program that compels you to think with Rudy Howard. The African American Scene, Wednesday evenings in the 6 o'clock hour with archives on YouTube. Just go to WPSLTV.com and look for Rudy Howard's African American Scene. This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast. Webcaster to the world on Google Home, Alexa, and the TuneIn app on your smartphone. The time right now is 7 o'clock.